After school the next day, I covertly headed off again for the downtown bus, this time for the number 7 line, whose route ran some 3/4 of a mile from Summit Avenue on the far side of the farmed acreage of the orphan asylum, out where St. Peter's Church fronted the thoroughfare of Lyons Avenue, and where, in the shadow of its cross-capped steeple, I was even less likely to be spotted by a neighbor or a schoolmate or a family friend than when I made it my business to walk past the high school and down to Clinton Place to take the 14. I waited at the bus stop outside the church beside 2 nuns identically buried within the coarse, heavy cloth of those voluminous black habits that I'd never had a chance to study as I did that day. Back then, a nun's habit reached to her shoes, and that, along with the brilliant white starched arc of cloth that starkly framed her facial features and obliterated all lateral vision, stiffened wimple that hid scalp, ears, chin, and neck, was itself embroidered in an extensive white headcloth, made the traditionally dressed Catholic nuns the most archaic-looking creatures I had ever seen, far more startling to behold in our neighborhood than even the creepily mortician-like priests. No buttons or pockets were visible, and thus there was no way to figure out how that sheath of thickly gathered curtaining got hooked up, or how it was taken off, or whether it was ever taken off, given that overlaying everything was a large metal cross suspended from a long cord necklace, and strung beads big and shiny as killer marbles that dangled several feet down from the front of the black leather belt, and secured to the headcloth a black veil that broadened at the back and fell straight to the waist. Other than within the naked little region that was the wimpled, plain, unornamented face, no nap, no softness, no fuzziness anywhere. I assumed these were 2 of the nuns who supervised the lines of orphans and taught in the parochial school. Neither looked my way, and on my own, without a wisecracking sidekick like a relaxman, I didn't dare to look at them, other than in stolen glances. Though even while I stared at my own 2 feet, the clever child's capacity for self-censorship deserted me, and I confronted the mysteries again and again, all the questions concerning their female bodies and its lowliest functions, and all tending toward depravity, despite the seriousness of the afternoon's secret mission and everything that rode on the outcome. I couldn't manage to be anywhere near a nun, let alone a pair of them, without a mind awash in my none too pure Jewish thoughts. The nuns took the 2 seats behind the driver, and though most of the seats farther to the rear were empty, I sat down across the narrow aisle from the 2 of them, in the seat just back from the turnstile and the fare box. I'd had no intention of sitting there, didn't understand why I was doing so, but instead of moving off to where I could be out from under the sway of unfettered curiosity, I opened my notebook to pretend to do my schoolwork, simultaneously hoping and dreading that I'd overhear them say something in Catholic. Alas, they were silent, praying, I supposed, and no less spellbinding for doing it on a bus. Some 5 minutes from downtown, there was a musical clacking of rosary beads as together they rose to disembark at the wide intersection of High Street and Clinton Avenue. On one side of the junction there was an auto dealer's lot, on the other the Hotel Riviera. As they passed, the taller of the nuns smiled down at me from the aisle, and with a vague sadness in her quiet voice, perhaps because the Messiah had come and gone without my knowing it, commented to her companion, "Well, what a well-scrubbed, cute little boy." They should have known what I'd been thinking. Then again, maybe she did. A few minutes later, before the bus took the big final turn off Broad Street and started down Raymond Boulevard for its last stop outside Penn Station, I too got off and began running toward the federal office building on Washington Street where Aunt Evelyn had her office. Inside the lobby, I was told by an elevator operator that the OAA was on the top floor, and when I got there, I asked for Evelyn Finkel. "You're Sandy's brother," the receptionist announced. "You could be his little twin," she added appreciatively. "Sandy's 5 years older," I told her. "Sandy's a wonderful, wonderful boy," she said. Everybody loved having him around, and then she buzzed Aunt Evelyn's office. "Nephew Philip's here, Miss F," she announced. And within seconds, Aunt Evelyn had swept me past the desks of some half-dozen men and women working at their typewriters and into her office overlooking the public library and the Newark Museum. She was kissing me and hugging me and telling me how much she had missed me, and despite all my apprehension, beginning of course with the fear that my meeting with our estranged aunt would be discovered by my parents, I proceeded as I had planned by confiding in Aunt Evelyn how I had secretly gone alone to the newsreel theater to see her at the White House. I sat in the chair at the side of her desk, a desk easily twice the size of my father's just over on Clinton Street, and asked her to tell me what it had been like to eat dinner with the President and Mrs. Lindbergh. When she began to answer in elaborate detail with an eagerness to impress that didn't quite make sense to a mere child, already overwhelmed by the magnitude of her betrayal, I couldn't believe I was so easily tricking her into thinking that this was why I was here. There were 2 big maps, pierced with clumps of colored pins, and fixed to an enormous cork bulletin board on the wall back of her desk. The larger map was of the 48 states, and the smaller of just New Jersey, whose long inland river boundary with neighboring Pennsylvania we had been taught in school to identify as the uncanny outline of an Indian chief's profile, the brow up by Phillipsburg, the nostrils down by Stockton, and the chin narrowing into the neck in the vicinity of Trenton. The state's densely populated easternmost corner, encompassing Jersey City, Newark, Passaic, and Paterson, and extending northward to the ruler straight border with the southernmost counties of the state of New York, denoted the upper back end of the Indian's feathered headdress. That was how I saw it then, and how I continue to see it. Along with the 5 senses, a child of my background had a sixth sense in those days, a geographic sense, the sharp sense of where he lived and who and what surrounded him. On Aunt Evelyn's spacious desktop, besides separately framed pictures of my dead grandmother and of Rabbi Bengelsdorf, there was a large autographed photo of President and Mrs. Lindbergh standing together in the Oval Office, and a smaller photo of Aunt Evelyn in her evening gown shaking the President's hand. "That's the reception line," she explained. On the way into the state dinner room, the guests each file past the President and the First Lady and the evening's honored guest. You're introduced by name, and they take a photograph, and the White House sends it to you. Did the President say anything? He said, "Nice to have you here." "Are you allowed to say anything back?" I asked. I said, "I'm honored, Mr. President." She made no effort to disguise how important that exchange had been to her, and perhaps to the President of the United States. As always with Aunt Evelyn, there was something very winning about her enthusiasm, though in the context of my household's confusion, I couldn't miss what was diabolical about it as well. Never in my life had I so harshly judged an adult. Not my parents, not even Alvin or Uncle Monty, nor had I understood till then how the shameless vanity of utter fools can so strongly determine the fate of others. "Did you meet Mr. von Ribbentrop?" Now, almost girlishly bashful, she replied, "I danced with Mr. von Ribbentrop." "Where?" "There was dancing after dinner in a big tent on the White House lawn. It was a beautiful night, an orchestra and dancing, and Lionel and I were introduced to the foreign minister and his wife, and we got to talking, and then he just bowed and asked me to dance. He's known to be an excellent dancer, and he is, it's true, a perfectly magical ballroom dancer, and his English is faultless. He studied at the University of London and then lived for 4 years as a young man in Canada. His great youthful adventure, he calls it. I found him a very charming gentleman and highly intelligent." "What did he say?" I asked. "Oh, we talked about the President, about the OAA, about our lives. We talked about everything. He plays the violin, you know. He's like Lionel, a man of the world who can talk knowledgeably about anything. Here, look, darling. Look at what I was wearing. Do you see the bag I was carrying? It's gold mesh. See this? See the scarabs? Gold enamel and turquoise scarabs." "What's a scarab?" "It's a beetle. It's a gem that's cut to resemble a beetle, and it was made right here in Newark by the family of the first Mrs. Bengelsdorf. Their workshop was world famous. They made jewelry for the kings and queens of Europe and all of the wealthiest people in America. Look at my engagement ring," she said, placing her perfumed little hand so close to my face I felt like a dog suddenly and wanted to lick it. "See the stone? That is an emerald, my dearest dear child." "A real one?" She kissed me. "A real one. And in the photo here, That's a link bracelet. It's gold with sapphires and pearls. Real ones, she said, kissing me again. The foreign minister said he'd never seen a bracelet more beautiful anywhere. And what do you think that is around my neck? A necklace? A festoon necklace. What's festoon? A chain of flowers, a garland of flowers. You know the word festival, you know festivities, and you know feast, don't you? Well, they're all related, and look, the two brooches, see them? They're sapphires, darling. Montana sapphires, set in gold. And do you see who's wearing them? Who is that? It's Aunt Evelyn. It's Evelyn Finkel of Dewey Street at the White House. Isn't that unbelievable? I guess so, I said. Oh, sweetheart, she said, drawing me to her and kissing me now all over my face. I guess so, too. I'm so glad you came to see me. I've missed you so. And she stroked me then, as if to find out if my pockets were stuffed with stolen goods. Only years later did I come to understand that her skillful way, with her groping hands, may well have been what accounted for the rapid renovation of Aunt Evelyn's life by a figure of the stature of Lionel Bengelsdorf. Brilliant, erudite though the rabbi was, superior to everyone even in his egotism, Aunt Evan must never have been at a loss with him. The paradise of envelopment that followed was, of course, unidentifiable at the time. Wherever I put my own two hands, there was the soft surface of her body. Wherever I moved my face, there was the thickness of her scent. Wherever I looked, there was her clothing, new-sprung wrappings, so light and gauzy that they didn't even veil the sheen of her slip. And there were the eyes of another human being. I'd never quite seen them before. I had not reached the age of desire, was blinded, of course, by the word aunt, still found the random little stiffenings of my acorn of a penis, the puzzling nuisance it had always been, and so the delight that I took, nestling into the curvature of my mother's 31-year-old sister, a tiny, lively Thumbelina, seemingly timid in no way, and formed after the model of hills and apples, was a lifeless feeling of frenzy and nothing more, as though a rare, imperfectly printed treasure of a stamp that I knew to be priceless had accidentally turned up on an ordinary letter dropped by the postman into our Summit Avenue mailbox. Aunt Evelyn, my darling, do you know that we're moving to Kentucky? Uh-huh. I don't want to go, Aunt Evelyn. I want to stay at my school. She stepped sharply back from me with an air now of anything but a paramour. She asked, Who sent you here, Philip? Sent me? Nobody. Who sent you to see me? Tell the truth. It is the truth. Nobody. She returned to the chair beside the desk, and the look in her eyes made it necessary for me to do everything I could not to get up and run. But I wanted what I wanted too much to run. There's nothing to be afraid of in Kentucky, she said. I'm not afraid. I just don't want to have to move. Even her silence was all embracing, and if I had indeed been lying, would have forced from me the confession she wanted. Her life, poor woman, was a perpetual state of intensity. Can't Selden and his mother go instead of us? I asked. Who is Selden? The boy downstairs whose father died? His mother works for the Metropolitan now. How come we have to go and they don't? Wasn't it your father who put you up to this, dear? No. Nobody even knows I'm here. But I saw she still didn't believe me. Her aversion to my father was too precious to be dislodged by obvious truth. Does Selden want to go with you to Kentucky? She asked me. I didn't ask him. I don't know. I just thought I'd ask you if they could go instead. And we will pause there.